how to finish the school year strong for parents and students today on Keeping You Organized. Today on Keeping You Organized, we are joined by Kathy Jenkins from Come to Order, which is based in Virginia. Kathy, welcome to Keeping You Organized.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Well, we are approaching the end of the school year. We probably have, a month and a half before a lot of kids are getting out. And I know that one of your specialties is organizing students, and I want to get in depth into that a little bit today, especially this concept of finishing the school year strong. But maybe before we get into that, why don't you tell us a little bit about how you first got into professional organizing and then how you kind of jumped into this specialty with students and really parents too, I would imagine.
Yes, very much it is a partnership between the parents and the students. How I got into it is I've always been organized, one of those that was just given that gift. And round about 98, I decided that corporate America wasn't for me anymore. And so I did a lot of research on professional organizing, designed my company as every good organizer should. And then I got pregnant with my first child. And so I kind of put those plans on the shelf a little bit and had 2 children, and then I found myself helping my friends in my mom's groups organize their kids' playrooms or whatever, and I realized, gosh, I really wanted to do this as a business, and I dusted off my little binder and off I went. So I launched my business in 2005, and that's Come to Order, and I work with mostly residential and families in Come to Order. So
and now it's grown to the point where you have other organizers working with you as well?
I do. And then round about 6 years ago, my son was in 3rd grade. My oldest son was in 3rd grade. He's now in 9th. And he was having some challenges with his grades. And I knew that he was smart. And so I started trying to figure out where is this coming from and realized that he had a very disorganized teacher, and therefore he was very disorganized. And so I spent a lot of time working with him that year on trying to help him stay organized, develop those really strong routines, because as you know, 3rd grade is when standards of learning for the No Child Left Behind Act comes into play. So that's a defining year in elementary school for children. And as I started working through that and was very active in his classroom, realized that there were other kids that were having the same problems. And so that's really what drove me to be interested in working with students. And from that, my other company, the Organizing Tutor, was born. I launched it. I did a soft launch in 2011 and have been going strong since.
Now, is the Organizing Tutor, is that a local organizing company, or do you do work with people all over the country?
I do work with folks mostly here in Richmond, but really my passion is to teach others how to do what I do. And so I am in the development stage of creating sort of a university, Organizing Tutor University, where I can teach, say, educators that are leaving the public education system or the private education system and want to do what I do, teach them how to work with students from an organizing their papers, elections, which is huge now for students, time, project management, and study skills. That's another big one, because these kids are not being really taught how to study in school. They're given a study guide and say, go study, but that's not teaching them the process of studying. And so by the time they get to college, they don't really understand how to do it. And we're seeing a lot of kids in college really floundering and struggling because they just don't know how to do studying properly for themselves. So.
All right. Well, let's go back to the 3rd grader, because that's a key year. What are the top 2 or 3 things that you want to attack right away and make sure that you have in order for a 3rd grader?
Right. So the big key is routines, right? Having a routine, a morning routine, so they get out the door on time, where they've have their papers, an after school routine where they're coming home, and I believe in giving them a little bit of downtime. They've been working all day. Everybody, when you come home from work, you want a little downtime, especially if you have something you need to work on after work. You want a little downtime in between. But having a great routine that affords and the time to get their homework done and their studying done, and then a nighttime routine that includes really preparing for the next day. And really, that's a lot of what I see with the students that I have coming to work with me. What I see a lot of is that there's just no routines in place. It's sort of catch as catch can. Everybody's running around and they're so busy. They have sports and dance and all of these things. Routines sort of take a back seat, and you've got kids eating in the car and trying to do homework in between lessons, and so routine is really key. And April is not too late to start trying to put some routines in place, because typically, depending on the school system, they have not done their standards of learning test. That's what we call it in Virginia. States have different names for it. But they haven't done their standardized testing. Probably that will take place early May. The kids in Virginia get out in June, and so theirs take place in late May. So there's still time to get some routines in place that afford these kids the opportunity to get some studying done in preparation for those exams.
So what are the tactical things you do to set up a routine? Do you need like a wall calendar? I mean, do you write it down? Do you have a meeting with the parent and the child and say, okay, let's negotiate the schedule? I mean, is it all just a schedule, or how do you train a child to get into a routine?
Right. So, a lot of that is dependent upon whether the parent is there or whether the child's going to daycare. So we have to take that into account. But a lot of cases, we simply will just write a list. You come home from school, you empty your backpack. You empty your lunchbox if you take your lunch, and then you have 30 minutes of a snack and some downtime. I encourage children to go outside and play during that downtime, get some of that energy out because they've been sitting in a classroom all day. But some kids are a little more introverted and need that quiet time to kind of get some energy back. So, a 30-minute show is not a terrible thing for them to engage in order to wind down. And then have that routine. Okay, let's sit down and we're going to take 20 minutes to work on a particular subject. Now, 20 minutes to get that homework done that needs to be done. But if you weren't assigned homework in social studies and you're going to have a social studies standards of learning test, or an SOL, then preparing for that, setting aside, 15 minutes to kind of start reviewing your notes, to rewrite your notes, to make flashcards, depending on how the child learns. And that's one of the things we do at Organizing Tutor. We have a whole assessment, and it is going to be online. Well, it's online in April. Yeah, it became online in December, excuse me. So we have a whole assessment, and one of the key pieces of that assessment is a learning styles and a thinking styles. So learning styles is, how do you take information? Do you take it by seeing, by hearing, or by doing? Because that's really important, because if we can identify that a child learns by hearing, then we can set up study strategies that involve a lot of vocalization, either them being quizzed vocally by their parents or peers, or by them sub-vocalizing, speaking out loud to themselves. So taking in information, and then thinking style is how you process that information and how that information is then manifested, how you show that you understand what you've just learned. And so that's what we really focus on Organizing Tutor, because that way we can hone in on helping the students study the most efficient and effective way for them.
Well, how about, sounds like there's a little bit of work in it for the parent. I mean, they're going to have to be the one keeping this child on the routine, kind of, and keeping them accountable. Is that part of your training too, on helping the parent? I mean, what if the parent is really disorganized?
Right. Yeah. And that is part of it. And one of the things that I always talk to the parents about is you have to practice what you preach. You cannot say to your child, it's really important for you to keep your binders and your notebooks in order. Meanwhile, the kitchen counter is covered with papers and bills that the parent has not themselves addressed. And so a lot of times it is working with the parent along with the student. So when I first started Come to Order, I would work with the parents, and then they would say, oh gosh, could you help my child? And now the reverse happens. I get parents who call and they want me to work with their child. And then we discover that they themselves have some challenges and need some systems to be put in place in order to be effective in what they're doing. So it's a win-win situation. It's great that I have the breadth to be able to work with both of them. But yeah, it's really important to practice what you preach. You can't say to a child, the bus leaves at 10 minutes of 7 and you need to be out the door at 6:45, and then you never leave on time to go to work, right? You can't, you have to practice what you preach. But there is, especially at the elementary school age, a lot of involvement that needs to come from the parent to sort of keep the child on track. But always having that list of what your schedule is a great reminder, even for the child that isn't a visual learner. It's a great reminder to be able to say, okay, where are we now? What time is it now? What are we supposed to be doing?
Right, expectations. Yeah.
Right, to that end, I do want to say that analog clocks are imperative for time management. Mm-hmm. Donna Goldberg brought this out in her book, The Organized Student, which is sort of the pinnacle of organizing. She was the first one that really sort of addressed students and organization, and she brought out the analog clock is an amazing tool. And in our home, with my two kids, I have a 6th grader and a 9th grader, we have an analog clock in every single room. We have it in the bathroom, in the bedrooms, in the kitchen, in the family room, and each of my children have their own small desk analog clocks sitting at their desk, because that way you can see time as it passes, and that's huge for being able to manage your time.
Right. Great. Well, hey, that's a great segue time because we have to take a little break here. But when we come back, I want to talk to you about maybe the high school going into college student and some of the challenges that they face. So we are with Kathy Jenkins from Come to Order, and cometoorderva.com is her regular organizing website, and the organizedtutor.com is her student organizing website, and we'll get more into that when we come back. It's Countdown to NAPO 2014. Coming up on episodes number 30 to 34 of the Keeping You Organized podcast, you can hear from some of the speakers from this year's NAPO National Conference. Hear from Marla D.
It really does take systems that work.
Regina Lark.
How do you organize for people with mental illness, folks in wheelchairs?
Annie Rohrbach.
If we can help our clients and ourselves be more conscious of and identify our mental clutter.
Heather Ahern.
Estate planning is something that we all need to do. We all know we need to do it.
Claire Coomer.
I think getting organized is very much about your space, but it's very, very much about time management.
And more. It's Countdown to NAPO 2014 on episodes 30 to 34 of the Keeping You Organized podcast. From Smead, keeping you organized. We are back now on Keeping You Organized with Kathy Jenkins from Come to Order out of Virginia. And Kathy, before the break, we were talking maybe some of the things that deal with probably universally, but we were talking about a 3rd grader and the importance of establishing a routine and how the parent comes alongside them. But let's talk about the high school student, because I know I have a couple of high school students myself, and they get a little more independent. You kind of tell them what to do, and they choose whether or not they want to listen. But how, and then as spring gets coming here, they get a little stir crazy, and it's kind of like, I have a senior in high school. I want her to finish big, right, and finish strong. So what are some of the strategies and tactics you use for helping a high school kid get organized and stay organized through the remainder of the school year?
Right. So, by high school, we're hoping that our students are self-motivated, right? Because at this point, they should be in preparation for college. But really, I think what helps with motivation is goals. right? Making sure that they keep their eye on the prize. So for your senior, I would imagine that she probably has the goal of getting into a particular college, and she should have applied by now and should be hearing back by now what college she wants to go to. But that being said, it's still important to finish strong. So helping remind her when you see your student sort of getting caught with spring fever, to remind them, look, we need to keep the eye on the prize, and your goal was this. This is the school you wanted to attend. This was the major that you were thinking about taking. And so being able to keep mindful of that can really help with motivation. I mean, if you have something you're working towards, even when you feel a little draw to in another direction, if you can get refocused onto that goal, you're better able to stay motivated.
Well, let's tell us a story. You don't have to use real names, but of a student maybe that you worked with who was pretty disorganized, and then what you did to help them get on track. And it doesn't matter which grade they're in, but I always love to hear the stories of how this actually worked in real life.
Right. So one of my favorites, I mean, they're all great kids, but one of my favorites is a 10th grader, and he played football in the fall and lacrosse in the spring. So he always had sports, and he was on the high school team, so he had to practice 4 days out of the week and then had games on the weekend. And he was really motivated when it came to college and what he wanted to do, but his grades were really suffering. And what I worked with him on to begin with was paper. Paper is always a big, even though this county did a lot on the computer, the kids are assigned their own laptop and they do a lot on the computer, there's still paper. Teachers are still providing paper. So we worked on getting those papers organized, but more importantly, getting the papers from the previous semesters that he might needed to hold on to study for exams, but that he didn't need to carry with him every day. Mm-hmm. So developing a system not only for the papers he carried to school, and he turned out not even to be a binder kid. He really loved an expandable where he could just kind of throw those papers in there, have a single area of the expandable for his homework to go into. So if it was empty, he knew he didn't have anything. And then we also created a file system at home for those papers he needed to keep to study for exams. Because here in the state of Virginia, in that particular school system, they did have exams as well as the standardized learning. So he needed to be prepared for that. And then we worked on time and routines. And one of the things that was really interesting that came out of the learning and the thinking styles assessment that I did was that he really liked to study in a common area. So his parents had set up this beautiful desk in his room, but he really liked being around everybody. And so it didn't bother him that his mom was cooking dinner and making all these noises cooking dinner. She thought that was a distraction when in fact it really made him feel comfortable. The other thing that came out of the assessment, was that he was a very early riser. He loved to get up at like 5 in the morning when the house was very quiet. And it played beautifully into the fact that he was at practice until 6:30 at night, 7:30 at night, and he was exhausted when he came home. So what we did was we flipped the studying. He would get up early, go downstairs in the kitchen in a common area, and do his studying in the morning. And it proved so successful. And it seems like such a simple solution, like, gee, why didn't I think of that? But sometimes you're in the midst of it, and you can't see all of these other possibilities. And so that's a great thing about hiring an organizer, no matter who you are, whether you're a student or adult. Sometimes it takes those eyes to come in from a totally different perspective to see where a different system could really work and be successful. So long story short, grades went from D's and C's to A's and B's. He passed all of his exams, and he was wonderfully for applying for early admission into colleges come 11th grade.
What was that organizing style or a personality type or whatever you want to call it for that kind of person who can sit in the middle of a noisy room and study and focus? Because I know there's a lot of people that need to have it perfectly quiet. I mean, is there kind of a name for that style? Right.
So the book that I really turned to is the Every Child Has a Thinking Style by Anna Nacone. Okay. And in there she describes that the brain is really divided into 4 quadrants. The left side being more linear and logical and factual based, and the right side being more creative and possibilities and that type of thing. So he was a basal right, which is called a harmonizer. And in her book, Every Child Has a Thinking Style, she related animals to the different thinking styles because it made it easier to understand. And so that thinking style is a dog. So when you think about a dog, dogs want to be around people and they love being in the middle of the commotion and being a part of everything. He was a very visual learner, so the noise didn't really distract him. He was able to tune that out. It was more important to be around people. Now, that being said, when he was studying at 5 in the morning, he was the only one awake, but he needed to go downstairs into that common space. He would either sit at the kitchen table, or if he was just reading, he might sit on the sofa. But it was the fact that that was seen as a common space is what resonated with him, made him be able to kind of feel comfortable and get into that study mode.
Wow. Well, listen, we're kind of running out of time here. I want to give you an opportunity to let people know how they can connect with you, students and parents, through the Organized Tutor. What's the best way for them to reach out to you?
Right, so it's the Organizing Tutor, organizing.com, and on there, as I said, there's an assessment that parents can just go out and take for themselves, and then they'll get a report that gives them the assessment results as well as recommendations. Very high level, but at least it's a jumping off point. That's also where other organizers are coming in and learning from me. So there are locations where we have other organizing tutors that are out there providing these services around the country, and that's growing. So you can look there. And then come to orderva.com. It's here in Richmond that we work in the surrounding areas, that we work with adults, either in residential or some small business, entrepreneurs, home-based businesses, that type of thing.
Well, great. Well, hopefully people, and we'll put the links to your websites in our show notes as well. But Kathy, thank you so much for your time today, and we hope to have you back on another program.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. I appreciate you letting me share my passion for organizing.
Absolutely. So it's Kathy Jenkins from ComeToOrderVA.com and theorganizingtutor.com today on Keeping You Organized.